90% of the time when someone says, I don't have enough time, they actually have too much time, in my opinion. And they hate hearing that. But it's true, because what's usually happening is that they're not really using their time effectively.
Ari Meisel. He's a self-described fixer and a maker, an entrepreneur coach, and the author behind the less doing philosophy.
He developed his famous optimize, automate, outsource framework after a battle with Crohn's disease forced him to find ways to be effective in just 1 hour a day.
Why are businesses so super slow to kind of pull the bandage off, and then it creates these, like, it's more painful than just ripping the bandage off.
That. The thing about the rip the band-aid off is funny, because it's not just like, oh, let's just do it quick and get it over with. There's intention there. So that's the difference, is saying like, no, we're gonna do this system. It's gonna be a quick change and we're gonna switch over to this thing. So there is a reasoning behind it. Like, this is gonna hurt and we're just gonna grit it, but we're doing it together.
What do you say to the business owners that are saying like, hey, we have to have a meeting for this, when this meeting should be like, are we actually prepared for the meeting?
We all need to get on the same page. We don't need a meeting for that, right? Because you're not going to be on the same page at a meeting, because the odds that 2 people, much less 3, 4, or 5 people in a meeting are going to be in the same circadian rhythm and actually be fully attentive and showing up.
Can you describe like asynchronous and synchronous communication and where to use them? Welcome to the pod.
Thank you.
I mean, I missed the wood shop, but this is pretty nice. This is like a nice upgrade.
Yeah. After 3 or 4 years of doing hobby woodworking, I kind of figured out what I actually like to do and what I need and what I don't need. And so this is definitely the optimized version.
Got it. So for those that don't know, Ari Meisel, the man, the myth, the legend. You got
the t-shirt.
The t-shirt. Oh, we haven't even got into that. This is my favorite Ari conference speaking shirt when I'm in the back of the room. So I always know when I catch your eye, because like you're presenting and you're just like, thank you. Yeah. Appreciate you coming. Mm-hmm. So, well, let's start this. We always want to know, like, who is Ari Meisel? So we'll start the conversation there.
What?
Sorry. It says no. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
No SD card in the camera.
Yeah, because we're running live on the. We're recording to the computer, but we'll do a little check. The cool part about doing this stuff live is we'll figure it out if it works. Yeah, it's recorded. I hope so. You imagine we do this whole thing and we don't record it? It's kind of like your entire life. You do a whole bunch of crap and no one ever knows about it. Mm-hmm. You do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. So yeah. And I'm very lucky. We are here at your house.
Yes.
And the houses the old house went through many renovations. And then you decided, you know what? Let me do what I do with most businesses, which is knock it down and build from scratch.
That's right. Blow it up and start right over.
Yeah. So this one's a little different lot. It is beautiful. Super happy.
Actually, to that point, it's worth pointing out that contrary to what people might think about like less doing all that stuff, a lot of times me and my wife, we actually choose the harder path.
Why is that?
I think it's what makes it more interesting and more fun. But actually, to be really frank, it's that same thing I've always said, is that restrictions breed innovation, right? So objectively speaking, we have a really chaotic life. We have 5 children. We've got 2 dogs, 3 cats. I'm involved in multiple different things. My wife is a performing musician. We've got all sorts of things going on. We're probably the last people in the world that should be building a house from scratch. Mm-hmm. But we did it. And we built a house that is perfect for us. And my wife spent most of the time doing designing. I helped a lot with the project management. But it's not about doing things in an easier way necessarily. It is about doing the right things.
It's amazing, when you build the right thing at the right time, the right way, you only need to do it one time because you do it right the first time.
That's
Oftentimes we find ourselves in business where we don't have the budget for something or we don't have the bandwidth for something. And these are words that you told me to eliminate out of my vocabulary and diet a long time ago. And you say, if you ever use the word bandwidth again, I'll fire you as a client. And that was a wake-up call. And being one of your earlier clients, I had the exact problem in which I thought you solved, which was I had more excess of opportunities that were outside of my current infrastructure. And it was just the pain of saying no. And I think there's a lot of power in saying no. I really do. I believe there's a ton of power in saying no to things so you have the right opportunities. But for me, there was a lot of pain because it was the ones that I wanted I was saying no to because there was things that I had committed to. And as a man of my word and as a man of somebody who wants to follow through on things, I was letting down kind of my future version of myself for things in which I committed to in my past business life. And that was when I like started working with you, and it really kind of opened up so many opportunities. And I'll tell the first story, which was we had set out an entire game plan to do like a 5-year plan. We said, okay, 3 to 5 years, this is your window, Cab. This is what you're going to do. Here's exactly the steps you're going to get to, and we're going to gut this other stuff. Awesome. So we put that in motion, and then something should hit the fan. I needed to do it now, and within 3 months, we hit the 5-year goal. And that's when I knew that once you put pressure on a situation within the right strategy, you could make it happen. So I want to first say thank you for that. But fun fact is we're here now. We still haven't gotten to who is Ari. I know that you're a man of many traits, but talk me through who are you?
It's something I've thought about for a very long time because I've been involved and have had so many different sort of passions and interests. And it's not an easy question. But now at almost 43 years old, I feel like the best way I can describe myself is that I am a fixer and a maker at the end of the day. And that applies to all sorts of things. As you know, I've been a volunteer EMT for almost 15 years now. I have been coaching entrepreneurs for the same amount of time. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm involved in all sorts of different charities and municipal groups, and always looking for opportunities to improve something in my life and my family's life, my community.
What keeps you interested in doing things? Because you've been somebody that's been there, done that.
Yeah, so that's a good point, right? Because in a lot of ways, what I do is I go through these periods where I do add more and more and more because I like the pressure cooker. I find that to be really valuable. And it's so interesting when you hear people talk about how they just don't have any time. And 90% of the time when someone says, I don't have enough time, they actually have too much time, in my opinion. And they hate hearing that. But it's true, because what's usually happening is that they're not really using their time effectively. So they're going through the motions, but they're not really having the impact that they want. And that's why you get this sort of mismatch and people feel like disengaged with the work that they're doing. So for me, especially in this last couple of years where I have added more and more, I'm on the board of our local Jewish center. I got elected to the school board here, which is a very contentious election.
Very, very tough too. There's a lot of competition and you get to see the true personalities to politics when you're inside of that, for sure.
Yes. And then in addition, I'm on the Princeton Community Democratic Organization. I'm on the Committee for Affordable Housing, Racial, Economic, and Social Equity. So these are all lofty, big things. And I added to see almost where the breakage would happen. And it hasn't yet, but I'm not adding more things at this point. I'm starting to refine and focus. And honestly, actually, I feel like it's a little bit like what people might do in the gym where you bulk up and then you cut.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely in a cutting phase right now.
Nice. Yeah, I think that just like any industry, it expands and then contracts and expands and contracts. Now, the cool part is if you're still in the industry when it's contracting, then when it expands again, you then get to be on the kind of outskirts of it, and you get this compounding effect, which is really valuable.
Yeah.
The other thing that's kind of interesting to think through is, it's not what you talk about, which is less doing. So it doesn't sound like less doing when you're doing all of these things. So is it because you're doing the things that you enjoy? Is it where do you find the excitement or passion about it?
So it's funny because, again, over the years, so many times people are like, "Oh, less doing. I could do some of that." It's like, no, you don't. You don't really understand what it is. It's not just about doing less. That's absolutely never been what it's about. It's always been about doing less of the things that don't bring you joy and really serve your sort of zone of genius, but also the things that don't really have a lot of impact. So I may be a bit of a glutton for punishment because a lot of times some of the things
True. Yes. Can we just say that's true?
A lot of times some of the things that interest me are things that really challenge me and bore me in some cases. Like this stuff with the school board, for example, there have definitely been times where it's like, oh my God, why did I do this? But those are the moments where it's like, all right, I'm going to figure out what I can do in this situation to actually make it more interesting. And so I find that to be a constant growth opportunity for me to be in that sort of discomfort in a way. But a really good example of that is that EMS is something that's really always been a big, big passion of mine. I've always, since I've done that, since I started doing that, I love that. And I actually at one point could have seen myself having a career in it. And in the current role where I'm at the rescue squad here, I have become the vice president. It's a nonprofit. I'm the vice president now, and I get to work with the president and the chief and really on senior level stuff. And because of some very annoying things between New York and New Jersey, I have to go through a whole bunch of hoops to get some certification stuff. And
Because what's happened in the educational system, it's also what's happened in technology. And I know this space really well. My dad wrote Minimum Standards 101.
yeah,
So for firefighters, my dad was he was a captain. He ran the third most busiest station in the country. He was president of Benevolent for many years. So I know that fire space pretty well, the EMS environment. My brother was paramedic and firefighter as well. Just like technology, unfortunately, the actual requirements, the paper, so to speak, is outdated. And we move, like, technology moves faster than our current infrastructure.
Oh, yeah.
Technology moves faster than our cybersecurity. So then it becomes dangerous. And what happens is the world has moved faster than some of these union-based organizations, and education, safety, security. These are very, very similar things, but yet it all comes down to history. History repeats itself over and over again. And yet it's like, it seems as if we don't not only learn from history, but we don't even know history so that we could talk about it. Because sometimes when we bring this shit up, people are like, well, I don't agree with you. Like, you're not agreeing with me or disagreeing with me. You're saying that never happened, which has happened every single time in history when these things take place.
Yeah, it's really funny. Do you know when the last Congressional National Telecommunications Act came out?
No idea.
1996, which is
Telecommunications.
Telecommunications Act, which is, 30 years ago. You know when the one before that was? 1934 was the previous. So it's like at some point, they're like, this internet thing is a big deal. We probably should put some laws in place. But what I was going to say is, so I love being an EMT, and I've done it in New York. I've done it in Trenton. I've seen a lot of stuff, and I love the idea of being able to help somebody and have an impact on their lives. And right now, for the last 3 or 4 months, I've not been riding on the ambulance as an EMT because of the certification stuff, but I've been our vice president. And it's been so interesting to me to see how being in an administrative role, I'm having such a greater impact in a lot of ways, and it feels really interesting. And it's something that, I don't know, a year ago I'd have been like, no, I want to be riding on the ambulance.
Well, you love doing the work.
I like doing the work, but I'm not the world's greatest EMT, and we have a lot of other EMTs, and like my 24 hours a month on the ambulance is not what's truly changing things in the community, but my ability to change us as an organization.
Well, it's similar to leadership, right? If you have a leader in the right place, then they can make the biggest impact.
Right.
But we get caught doing some of the work. We could put our heads down. It's like, I believe that you need to have boots on the ground and hand in the dirt to understand it well enough.
Oh, for sure.
But oftentimes, if you stay there, then it's a one-to-one exchange. And that's the time money exchange versus where it's like, I can make a big impact. By the way, I apologize. I spilled some coffee on your face. So for those that don't know, this is one of my favorite shirts to wear. I only wear it normally when you're presenting, but I figured if I pulled up to the new house, it would be a great time to do it.
Perfect.
So for those that don't know the story, I tell the story. I don't know if it's Coach Cavisms where I basically have... My brother's a fisherman now, right? And he's one of the greatest fishing charters and captains that I know. But what comes with being a good fisherman is the fish stories.
Oh, yeah.
Where the fish go like this to this to this to this to this. And what is fun is like when you go out with him, like he's like full of crap, man. You didn't catch 80 today. You didn't catch 50 today. You didn't catch this big. And then you go out with him and you're like, oh my God, you really do catch that much. It's crazy. Like it's insane. So you don't believe it unless you go through it. So my stories tend to become fish stories where they're bigger and bigger and bigger. So I tell this story. I'd like to hear you tell the story because this is the greatest rock album cover, I say, of all time. Not the greatest rock album.
It's very well known.
I think I would get destroyed in the music space if I said it was the greatest rap album. But I get to tell everybody this is the greatest album cover of all time. And it is your face. But why don't you tell us the story of how does little Ari get on the cover of what is known as the greatest rock album cover of all.
It's a surprisingly not crazy story. I mean, so my
It's not crazy to you, but to anyone that like Googles it, it's kind of a big deal.
so my father has been an art dealer for my whole life, and one of the artists he represented is named Mel Ramos. So Mel is passed away, but he was a contemporary of Roy Lichtenstein and part of the pop art movement. And when I was 11, previous to that, he had painted a painting called Crime Buster, which was like a comic book character from the 40s, I think. And it was this cover essentially. And when I was 11 years old, as a birthday present, he painted a new version of it with me, and it said Crime Buster underneath it, not Evil Empire. And there was a big C on the chest. And it was an official painting of his. So it was in one of his books, and the band saw the painting, and it was supposed to be like, I guess, the All-American Boy or something like that. And so they chose it, and then they made it to the E and the Evil Empire. And then there was a billboard in Times Square when I was 15 years old.
Yeah. It's almost like, oh, because they see evil in the kid, and in typical Jewish fashion, your dad's like, well, how do I make money off of this?
There you go.
So that's my version of the story. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's definitely what I've been telling the world.
It very well could be true.
I bet it is. So I figured that you got to put a little bit of color commenting on it. So, but it is pretty funny, and I do appreciate. I like kind of presenting history and kind of having a way to protect history a little bit, because I do think that we tend to lose. One thing I have learned is the winners write history. So we're learning from winners, but it's always skewed on how do they want to be perceived. And I use that in the same art kind of story analogy is. Salvador Dali looked up to Pablo Picasso for years, and he wanted to go through this process. If you go through his journey, he was he was a master at every different type of art, and he learned different actual materials, and you learned how to master the material. Then he learned pointillism and cubism and abstract art, and mastered it. And then he got bored, and then moved on to the next thing. And my favorite museum is the Picasso Museum in Barcelona, Spain. But my second favorite is actually the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, not St. Petersburg, Russia. And at that museum, you get to see his kind of journey, where he masters pointillism, and then he masters abstract art, and then he mastered this other thing before he started to create his own. And what happened was he really looked up to Pablo Picasso at the time and really wanted to build his relationship. Obviously, the ladies involved are the ones who ended up build the relationship and get it going, but they became great friends, mentor-mentee relationship over the years, and he built into his own art. And what's fascinating is one day Dali created a portrait as a level of respect to Picasso, and Picasso got it and never spoke to Dali ever again. Because the way you see yourself isn't necessarily often the way people see you. And I liken that to how winners write history, is because, well, I did some bad things to get to the top, therefore I won, and then I rewrite history. So then people are learning from the bias of the winners on their perspective of how they want to be perceived, not necessarily actually what took place.
Yeah.
So, normally the losers don't have their name in the record book. And I do think that I want to always kind of pay homage to history. I want to pay homage to how we got here. And I think oftentimes people don't give you credit for how they got to someplace. And I've been able to be behind the curtain on many different businesses, some that I've been a part of with a level of non-competes, in non-disclosures, chosen by me, that I don't want to be associated, purely because I don't think that it would make that big of an impact, because it's not me. It's not something it's not part of my mission. But you've been behind the curtain of hundreds, if not thousands plus of businesses, and you don't necessarily get the credit for what you deserve.
I mean, that's okay. That's not. I'm not doing it for the credit, right? I'm doing it because, well, there's two main drivers for me. Although, actually, if I can take one small aside and tell you a funny Dali story.
Please go ahead.
So Dali used to come into my father's gallery walking his black puma on a leash.
No way.
He was nutty. And somebody brought a painting to my father once because he wanted to have Dali authenticate it. He brought it to my father, asked him, can we bring this to Dali? Because I don't know if this is a real one or not.
Sure.
So my dad took the painting to Dali's studio, and Dali, being Dali, just sort of stared at it for a little while, one of these kind of things. And after a little while, he said, it's not Dali, but it's good. I'll sign it. And he did.
No way.
He signed it.
No way.
Yeah. So anyway,
Is the is the counterfeit so impressive? Therefore, I give it credit because it's close to my work.
I guess so. Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
That's
Fascinating.
good enough.
I thought you were going to tell me that he let like the puma bite it or haul it, and then that was the signature.
Nope.
It's pretty funny.
So so there's two motivators for me. One, I will be honest, the outward facing one is that I have actually had people like stop me in the street and been like, "Your book changed my life," and it's never a business owner that says that. It's
No.
always somebody who is like overwhelmed and didn't have any way of being productive or figure out a way to do that, and they were able to do this and this because of the methods that they learned in the book. And I'll even back up from that a little bit. And this is not like a humble brag. I think that it's not always necessarily even me. It's just that sometimes people need to hear something in the right way for it to actually click and make that change. And so those people do that, which is wonderful. And then on the other side of it is that it's always really exciting for me being involved in interesting businesses, right? And so, yes, I've worked with some very, very big name people and some really major institutions and lots of them. And the fascinating thing to me is that there's always a certain amount of things that are exactly the same in every business. And then there's that little bit that is very, very different. And sometimes that's really exciting and scary in some ways. And other times it's very satisfying. Just know, like, I know exactly what we're going to do here.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer of this, and I have to kind of sometimes put my ego aside, but it's like, is the goal credit or is the goal change?
Yeah.
And if the goal is change, then you do whatever you have to do as a leader to put the business and the environment in an opportunity to win.
Well, what I often say to clients too is that is it more important for it to be good or is it more important for it to be yours?
That's true. And I one thing you've taught me, which is get it going and then get it right.
Oh yeah, get it good. Get it going and get it good.
Oh, got it. So I see it. My fish stories, I'll interpretate it as I need to, right?
You can't always get it right. And actually, on that note, we're like going like chain of expressions here, but I always used to say in a lot of my businesses that were service-based businesses, I would say that I can't guarantee that I'm always going to get it right, but I do promise you from the bottom of my heart that I will always make it right.
That's a good one too. Yeah, we say in our business too, it's not a matter of who is right. It's a matter of what is right.
Yeah.
Because at the customer service level, it's about doing things with integrity.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of businesses that are like, wait a second, I don't believe that the customer's always right. I don't. But I do want to know, like, hey, in business, like, let's do the right thing. Because I want to win the right way. And in order to win the right way, you have to do things with integrity.
Yeah.
So, talk about like understanding your value. Is decides like what is the thing. There's a lot of things that are right about a business, and then you like turn the screw. It's the story that I heard from Tony Robbins years ago, which is this idea of that everything's broken on Christmas Day, and the guy needs to go and fix it, and he goes and turns the screw, and he needs an invoice to pay it out because he asked for $10,000, and the guy's like, he writes on the invoice, he's like $9,999. Turning screw $1, knowing what screw to turn 9,000.
Right.
And, you being someone who's been behind the curtain of Tony Robbins' company, Tony Robbins' organization, being a part of that, that's such a conglomerate, multi-billion-dollar organization that has an impact to trillions globally when you think about it. And yet you're dealing with the same problems. It's humans, it's behavior, right? And then
Communication.
To communication.
Communication is 80% of the problem in almost every business I see. It's not just the way people say it, but it's really about the systems that they use and the way that they organize information. I mean, that's literally 80% of the battle with every single company at every size.
But, you've really changed my perspective on, first of all, I didn't know what the word was. So I was laughing like, you're like, we're going to do it this way. And I'm like, hey man, excuse me, Wharton Business School grad, excuse me.
They don't teach this there.
Yeah, excuse me, but I did not know what the word asynchronous communication was. And I was laughing because I'm like, all right, this is how the coaching relationship is going to work. You're going to use words that I don't even know. And I will say I'm probably one of the biggest, this has absolutely changed my life when it comes to how I communicate, how people receive me. Too, because the energy and how they show up is in their best zone. I am not a morning guy, I'm a night guy. But I feel like I don't have to hold back my thought for 6 hours till the time where it's ready for them to hear it and then send it to them. And it's like, wait a second, you're responsible to answering your messages when you get to them. I'm not responsible for that.
Yeah.
And you really taught me the differences between synchronous versus asynchronous communication. I'd really love for you to explain the difference between the two and where and when you should use them. Because I do believe, and then I don't think that you invented it, but you probably are the first person coaching in an asynchronous model. And I think one of the things that we talked about was, I think it was probably 5 years ago. It's like, Ari, if you took your entire coaching and you compressed it into the exact messages, it would be hours. And that might have been 2-3 years with somebody. And the impact that it makes within this 1 minute or 30-second message changes an executive's life. Can you describe like asynchronous and synchronous communication and where to use them?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I seem to have been credited with starting this idea of coaching asynchronously. And I think part of that is because there's just been this cultural pushback to doing that. So okay, the simple dichotomy, right, is that synchronous communication is what we're doing right now, and we can talk to each other and we can respond and call and response. And asynchronous is exactly the opposite. Everybody who's watching this at some point is using asynchronous tools in their life. They're texting, they're emailing, but they're not thinking about them that way, because most people who have email, which is pretty much everybody, they've got that second screen on their computer where email's always up there, right? So no matter what's going on, if somebody sends you an email on their time, it pops up and you're ready to go with it, right?
Yeah,
it
squirrel.
becomes a to-do list that they fill for you. Same thing with text messaging. How many people send a text message, they send it, and then they're waiting. Oh, they're doing the 3 bubbles. What are they gonna say? Oh, the 3 bubbles stopped. Like, that's completely pulling away your attention. Yeah, well, sure. And that completely pulls your attention away, whereas you're supposed to be able to send your communication when you want and then receive it when you want. And that is for that type of stuff. If you're in a meeting with somebody, and that's a whole other topic, right? Like 99% of the meetings that people have could have been 3 voice notes, for example.
Sure.
There's very, very, very few times when you should be using synchronous communication. And I want to be clear, I'm not telling people that you shouldn't ever, because it's not a criticism, but one of the questions that I've always gotten over the years is, with all these optimizations and all these automations, you're getting rid of the human element. And my answer has always been, well, no, I'm getting rid of all the shit that gets in the way of the human element so that I can be human with something.
Let's double click on that, because I think I have felt that, and being in an organization now with my team being over 100 plus people globally, I'm probably hands down 100 times better at the human element than I am at process. And I'm 100 times better at the EQ of our business than the actual P&L of our business. And if I'm able to just be in that space all the time, my impact is spread drastically through the organization. But I do tend to get caught up in doing work synchronously because I think it's important to have that space, and that slows our work down. What do you say to the business owners that are saying like, hey, we have to have a meeting for this, when this meeting should be like, are we actually prepared for the meeting? So the meeting that we need to have for the meeting should actually be like done well before. There's a lot of people that they have bad meetings. Then there's a lot of people that don't even need to have meetings at all. But if you're going to have a meeting about it, is there time being spent on their own individually to get prepared for the meeting?
Yeah, so that's a good question, right? So why do we need to have this meeting, right? And somebody would be like, well, we all need to get on the same page. We don't need a meeting for that, right? Because you're not going to be on the same page at a meeting, because the odds that 2 people, much less 3, 4, or 5 people in a meeting, are going to be in the same circadian rhythm and actually be fully attentive and showing up is so unlikely, just from a statistics standpoint. But furthermore, one of the things that I found so interestingly with the asynchronous communication, and I'll be honest, I started asynchronous coaching because I thought it would make my life easier. I didn't realize how it would actually prove to be a more effective means of communicating, and certainly a more effective means of coaching. But what's so fascinating is that right now, you and I are talking. If you have a thought, I'm going to see your body language change. You're going to see mine change. You're going to know that I'm waiting to say something. You're going to shift in your seat because something's taking too long, getting boring, and it's going to change the conversation. But when somebody is speaking on a voice app like Carbon Voice, which is what I use now, and they're speaking into the ether, it's like someone podcasting in their own closet by themselves, speaking to millions of people maybe, but they're by themselves speaking into there and nobody's interacting. It is so pure when they do that. And that is what is so amazing with me. When it used to take me 3 to 4 months to get to a place of true trust with a client, where they would share things with me that they probably don't even share with a therapist, asynchronously, we get there in a week or 2 now, because it's completely unadulterated.
there's no mask to how I show up.
Exactly.
You don't like the way I look, or you don't like the way I sound, and there's the misinterpretation of reading.
Yeah.
You know, we have a lot of friends in the poker space and the tell space, and they're like all about like this, like I see all these little nuances. Those nuances, a lot of people are not mature to handle without a reaction, and they changes the way they think, and they go, is this good? So you're saying it's almost this idea of like, I'm in my own space. I could actually be in my own head and then actually be in someone else's ear. Right. Also, like, I think there's a lot of value to the power of how we learn. So I tend to, you know, when you coach with athletes, it's visual, it's kinesthetic, it's auditory, but no one is one of those things. They're all of those things, but they favor one versus the other. And there's also favoring one versus the other at different times and different things. So can you talk about the power of being in somebody's ear?
Yeah. So it's such a important one. So for me personally, I can tell you that I've always been it's been always challenging for me to read. I mean, I can read fine, but like it's never been a great way for me to retain information. I'll read the same thing 3 or 4 times, you know, to really get it. But always I've been an audio-visual learner. Like I could see a movie once and I'll remember every single line in the movie for the rest of my life, which is sometimes more annoying than it is helpful.
Yeah.
People talk 4 times faster than they write. We know that from a lot of data. And the idea that you can listen to something. So first of all, you can get the information out much more quickly, which people are a lot less edited when they ramble.
Of course.
And I love when people apologize, like, oh, there's going to be a ramble. It's like, no, please ramble. Like, I want you to ramble because you're going to get through all the bullshit and then tell me what I actually want to hear. Secondly, I don't remember what the percentage is, but it's something like 60 to 70% of language is tone and emotion and cadence, right? It's not the words you're saying. And we all know that if you write something, the great example, I forgot who put this in, there was some talk I heard one time, but on the screen it said, I didn't say you were beautiful. And the guy went through this exercise where he had us emphasize each word individually. So like, I didn't say you were beautiful, or I didn't say you were beautiful, or I didn't say you were beautiful. It's like 7 different ways of saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. But when you say that visually or verbally, you get so much more information out of that. You can listen to things at different speeds. You can slow somebody down or speed them up. And speeding up is not just about getting through it quickly. There are times when somebody is a slow talker and it is very hard to stay with them.
Of course.
Right? Because your cadence is totally different. And then the last thing too is that, and this is not necessarily about the audio part, but the old model where, you know, I meet with somebody once a week, or somebody, the typical model where you meet with like a therapist once a week or something like that. The idea that somebody on a Friday has a fight with their partner and then they're supposed to hold on to that and have this ridiculous narrative in their head about all the things that it meant and the things that they're pissed about. And then they go home and they have fights with their spouses and they're a terrible family person all weekend. And then they get to Wednesday and 7 other things that are probably more important have happened. And they don't even know what they want to talk to you about anymore. And as a coach, you have to be so performative in those situations because I can't just sit with it blankly and then not say anything, right? I'm there to say something. So if we have this situation where somebody can have that fight, they walk out of the meeting and they just unleash on a voice message to me. Every curse word there is, this guy was this and he did that and it's his fault. And by the end of it, they probably already talked themselves out what the issue was anyway. And then I can listen to it and I can listen to it again. And then 3 hours later, I can respond with the 90-second silver bullet that they need to move on to the next issue and stay effective. There's no comparison.
And it just, if you think about if you were doing that in a therapy session, number one, it's not in the same space because you're a different emotion brought to it. And
absolutely.
then number two, you're responding in your best coaching space and they're responding in their best leadership space. So the time of that actual experience versus the time of your showing up as a coach is like the perfect intersection. Whereas a lot of times it's like, I got to bring this up to my coach on Tuesday because I have a coaching call.
Right.
Well, it's like, well, why wait till Tuesday? Yeah. And that's the biggest gap that I see. And in my coaching, is the same thing. I've been able to say like, hey, get this out of your head. Because it's like, number one, it slows you down and it holds you back. When we were at, I don't remember if it was LA at Pear's house or in New York, but we were with Jim Quick, right? And Jim was talking about if you're a slow reader and I'm a very slow reader, why is it so hard to retain information? It's because think about if somebody was talking.
Yeah, you lost me already.
Yeah. And it's like versus beats, right? And we think about why is 90s and 2000s hip hop the best era of hip hop and rap music? It's because it's got that rhythm. It is. And everything, when I was a DJ growing up, everything to me was organized in beats per minute. 90s hip hop, and the cool part about it is 90s and 2000s hip hop is literally 90 to 100 beats per minute.
Perfect for CPR.
So, yeah. And it's really valuable because it's the easiest way to retain information is that rhythm. And in sport, timing is everything.
Yep, sure.
So tone, cadence, but also the aha moment. It's a good joke. It's a good comedian. It's a good movie. It's a good story script. So all of these things are really valuable. And I remember Jim saying that. I go, oh, it made me feel good knowing, it made me feel validated that like I talk to think. It also made me feel validated in the sense of I do not need to feel that I have to write this message to you in order to get my message across. Sometimes I could actually talk it and then edit.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit easier. And I think that's what you're doing too in the way that you coach through Carbon or just mainly asynchronously is that you're editing the fluff out of the meeting. So if a meeting is 30 minutes or an hour, if this was actually just a script of a transcript of the meeting and they read it, the meeting would actually be much shorter. But imagine if you actually had it only the sections that were that mattered in the transcript, it would probably be a 1 page. And that's what you do in your coaching.
Well, and further that, I mean, I'll be honest with a lot of the work that I do and a lot of these new companies that I see in different situations, I'm always coming up with ideas for new content, right, that I want to share with others. And so if I was in a coaching session live and somebody says something, I'm like, oh my God, that's a great idea. And I start writing that down, like I'm gone.
You're distracted.
Right. Whereas if I'm on Carbon, I'm like, that's a really good question. And now I'm going to think about my answer in a way that I can also share this answer with other people. And I'm always thinking about that when I'm producing content. 3 audiences, right? The first audience is potential clients. Second audience is current clients. And the third audience is people that work with me on a team, right? So if I can do one piece of content that hits all 3, like that's golden to me.
Yeah, that's super valuable from like a value and investment standpoint. The next thing too is I was getting frustrated one time because got to the point where my opportunities were outside of my infrastructure. So like my plate was this big, plate got this big, food got overloaded, opportunities were overloaded to the point where it's like, well, shit, I didn't stop using that size plate once things started to get smaller, And it's also too, it's like if you go to a buffet, you put a bunch of shit on your plate. But if you go to a Michelin star restaurant, you have a big plate and a small piece of food that is like amazing. And that one bite is worth everything. And that's what you've done is you've got me to basically be in that kind of Michelin star restaurant. But then what ended up happening is I had to do something. I was so pissed. I'll never forget. I messaged you from the DMV. I'm like, you remember this? This is years ago. It might be like 8 years now. Right. And I'm like, Ari, I'll be honest with you. I am bored. This is stupid. And I am bored. He goes, there's a lot of power in being bored. And let's talk about that. Like, why is giving a leader space to be boring in a moment valuable?
Oh, yeah. So it's funny. I was just talking to a client about this yesterday. He was talking about the 996.
What's that?
The 996. So that is the way that they like to work in Silicon Valley. 9 to 9, 6 days a week.
That's horrible.
But that's what
no way.
Do. Right. So it's like a thing. It's part of the culture. We do the 996, right? And if you're not doing the 996, then you're not building, you're not growing. And this client has been doing that for a while, quite successfully. So the problem, first of all, is that when it doesn't happen, he feels like he's being unproductive, right? So when he has like a normal week, but also what I said is like, there's no way that you can think that you're being productive for 12 hours, 6 days a week. That's impossible. It really is. And nor would we want it to be, right? Because again, we always have to make that distinction. Productivity is producing more. Efficiency is producing more with less. And effectiveness, which is what I really teach, is about producing the right things.
And I talk about that as so I think that productivity it's a misrepresentation of what you're trying to accomplish. Effectiveness, being effective is more important, but you get there by being productive.
Yeah, that's the road on the way there. But at the same, but just like it is it's the road there. Productivity is a journey that has no end. I always like to refer to this. I think it must be like Lao Tzu or Confucius or something like that. But before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. That's right. It is just sort of like a blip on the way there. So this idea that we're always chasing productive, being more productive, productivity is, I have to use it because it's the word that people know, but that's really not what this is about.
I got it. How do you handle things that distract you when you're not doing a high focused, concentrated, needed task? So for instance, if I'm playing a sport or if I'm fighting or if I am in my calm or if I'm in my flow state, then I'm locked in and bombs could go off and I'm not distracted. Like honestly, I have ADD. You could call me whatever you care. I could care less what doctors call it today. But the question I have is, I have the attention span of a goldfish. Right now, this stuff that's going on in the background, it's distracting the shit out of me. So like, Ben, whatever you're doing is driving me bonkers right now. I can't do my job. So whatever you're doing, I can't even think. But how do you do that? Because this is not like my brain's not like, I'm locked in to have this podcast with my friend Ari. Like I don't need to be, because there's no physical or like emotional or life threat to me. So therefore my brain doesn't like snap on and I got to lock in. How do you handle distractions? For instance, something just like in this situation, how do you handle distractions? Because you got 5 kids.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's ever like calm, but yet you're always calm.
So I always say that, I say my wife and I feel like we swim in the chaos, and oddly, or maybe counterintuitively or whatever, but, and I think a lot of this is what makes me a good EMT actually, is that I almost focus best when everything around me is on fire. And I have multiple stories of times where somebody was literally dying in front of me and family members are screaming at you and there's people trying to break doors down and there's cops and there's guns around, like all sorts of things. And I could just get locked in and do the thing that I had to do. So I call it, with my wife, I call it my girl on fire time. Sometimes I'll say like, I need 15 minutes, girl on fire. And that's like, don't interrupt me. And I need 15 minutes and I can get more done in those 15 minutes than I think most people can get done in 4 or 5 hours.
I've seen you do it.
Yeah. And I know that though. And then what that means is that I can't access that all the time. And I'm aware of that because I think that would be exhausting, honestly. So the biggest thing about this is understanding how you work and when you work best. And the fact that I communicate asynchronously with people means that, one, I know that if I don't answer this until 11 o'clock at night tonight, when everyone else is asleep and it's calm and quiet around me, that's fine. I'm good with that. If I'm up at 5 in the morning and I do it, that's totally fine. I know that that is there, and I have the ability to literally have out of sight, out of mind. So it's not like it's nagging me and nagging my attention. It doesn't exist until that time. What it also means is I know that like, hey, I'm gonna go literally from like my bedroom downstairs 1 floor to the kitchen, and in that time going down the stairs, I know that I can respond to 2 clients effectively.
That's incredible.
So that's the biggest thing, is like knowing that you have that ability to get your word and your thoughts out, whether it's thoughts that you're sharing with somebody else or simply an idea that you don't need to hold on to, but you want to put it somewhere safe. That is very, very freeing and allows you to stay focused in the moment.
It's exhausting to hold on to that. And then I have to remember it. I wanted to show you when I pulled up what was going on for sure, because one thing that I learned was that the like I have like my car, I have a dry erase marker, and I'm listening to, let's say I'm listening to, I'm more of an audiobook person than I am a podcast person, because it's like the podcast is just the conversation. Sorry to disappoint everybody here. But the podcast is just the conversations about someone who's an expert as a book. So I want to just take the 10 years collapse time, listen to that. And then if I dive deep into it, I can from there. So that's one thing, but I can't interrupt the podcast to then, or the audiobook to then take the note on my phone. So I have a dry erase marker and I write it on the window. And like that works for me. And it's just like,
That's great.
Horrible, but it works for me because it's like I got it out.
I used to keep a dry erase marker in the shower.
That's right. That's not when we used to shower together, but when you
Right.
just get those wet
There was no
notes
point
as a
then.
gift.
I never got any
Disappointed.
ideas during that.
Ripping the Band-Aid off versus doing it slowly. Why are businesses so like super slow to kind of pull the bandage off, and then it creates these like it's more painful than just
Nice
ripping the
transition, I
Band-Aid
like
off,
that.
right? So let's leverage this.
Yeah. So change is hard, right? And particularly I find in business, it's hard. And you have the people who either they jump into something every 2 weeks and they change something every 2 weeks, and that just drives teams crazy, right? And I find that the more and more I do this over the years, the more I'm protecting the entrepreneur's team from the entrepreneur's mind in many cases, versus saying like, so the thing about the rip the Band-Aid off is funny because it's not just like, oh, let's just do it quick and get it over with. There's intention there, right?
Yeah.
So that's the difference, is saying like, no, we're going to do this system. We're going to make it's going to be a quick change and we're going to switch over to this thing. We're going to start using Slack. We're going to start using Carbon Voice, whatever it might be, but we're going to do it. And this is why, right? And so there is a reasoning behind it. Like this is going to hurt and we're just going to grit it, but we're doing it together versus, just trying to peel it off slowly and just torturing yourself to the point where I know that at least one of my kids, not this one, would stop halfway through and be like, no, I can't do it.
Just rip it.
And so then you just wasted all that time hurting yourself and you didn't even finish.
And that's what happens with a lot of people too, is they get things to 70 or 90% there and they don't get it out.
Right.
And I have 5 books, 17,000 articles, 45,000 Twitter posts that have never went out to the world because they're just in drafts or they're on. I have at least 3 best-selling, like New York Times best-selling books on sticky notes somewhere.
Yeah.
And this was all prior to you. Now I probably only have, 2, and realizing that none of them are New York Times bestsellers because I don't want to do the pay-to-play model.
Right. Which you would have to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think it's a matter of like, can we get things out? Can we get things done? And then like reiterate and then fine tune it.
Yeah. And I usually what I'll tell clients too is like, I would go so far as to say that if you're not sharing this information, you're really doing the rest of the world, or at least your company and your community, a disservice. Right? Because a lot of people is like, oh no, it's, I just don't have the time, or it's just not ready, or I don't know if I want to do this. It's like bullshit. Like somebody out there, what's easy to you and what feels commonplace to you, and this is not like an intelligence success thing. It's just like, oh, someone's been doing this for a long time and it works. The fact that you're not sharing that with other people at any level, when there's people who can't even do 1% because they don't know how, shame on you. Like you've got to share that information. You've got to put it out there. It's one of the main reasons why I have 12 books. It's not because I got 12 publishing deals. It's because I didn't want to wait for a publisher. My very first book, Less Doing More Living, was published by the largest publisher in the world, Penguin Random House, right? Which seemed really exciting at the time. And it took a year and a half from the finished manuscript, which I already had when I met them, to actually hit the market.
It's on my bucket list is to be published by Penguin, believe it.
Really?
It is. It's ironic, yes.
Well, everything since then has been self-published, and I got to the point where I think the very last book on productivity, I went to them, to Penguin, and I wanted to see if they were interested, and they were. And they were like, this would be so great. I can't remember what this was like. I feel like this might have, I don't remember when I put it out. I guess it was 21, 22. It was before the pandemic. But I think it was like 2020 when I was doing this. And they're like, oh, this would be so great for our 2022, spring lineup. 2 years later.
Yeah.
I was like, listen, I'm gonna publish this in 3 weeks. And I'll send you a couple of copies.
Wow.
Just like that. And I did. And I put it out there. And I feel confident that at least one person has read that
100%.
and had been able to do something with it. And that's what matters more to me.
It's also the IP too. When you do, people don't know this about publishing. Someone has written a book and someone has got a bunch in the hopper and help other authors. You lose your IP when you go to a publisher. There's a lot of nuances of they're like, well, that story wasn't what you wanted it to be. We want to do this to it. We want to adjust it. And there's some better structures that are in practice than people actually talk about. And one of them is this, I think your original framework, which is OAO, I think it'd be good to talk about it just to understand for those that don't know it. It's actually really valuable, but then how that's evolved, and yet it still comes back to first principles, no matter what's going on with technology, no matter what's going on with the world. You mind breaking down OAO?
Yeah, of course. And that is the overarching framework that everything falls back to. I will just say one other thing about what we were just talking about, which is I always think about this as the sort of a boxing analogy, which is that you can't have power without speed, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately. And so we don't want people to be hasty, but you need to move. You need to be moving, and you need to have a pace and consistency and momentum in order to really do anything with any power. So OAO. So OAO came about kind of by accident. It was actually, I was on the phone with an agent. It was for a book agent. This is before the actual book was written. This was for something separate. And they were asking about sort of the framework. And on the spot, I was like, no, what I do is I help people optimize and automate and outsource, because it was very literally what I was doing at the time for people or with people. And that OAO framework became the base framework for everything, because the order of it is extremely important. Many people have some bad story about outsourcing. Right? I always love to do this when I would speak in person and say, raise your hand if you've ever outsourced something, and you'd get, half the room would raise their hands at least. And then I'd say, now, if you've ever had a bad experience, raise your hand. And more people would always raise their hand every single time, right? So it's all right. So let me get this straight. So more of you have had a bad experience outsourcing than any of you total have had outsourcing. Okay, got it. So I was like, well, the good news is that's your fault.
Isn't math.
Right, the math is not mathing. I was like, well, the good news is it's probably your fault, because
That is hard to hear as a
yeah.
leader, as an entrepreneur, as an owner.
it's so funny, the things that people take for granted that they just assume that they know how to do because they've been doing it for a long time. So most people don't know how to make decisions. They make 1,000 decisions a day. They don't know how to do it. They don't have a way of doing it or a framework. And I will guarantee you that most people do not know how to delegate, even though they've been telling people shit to do forever.
Yeah.
They have no idea how to delegate, because for most people, delegation is, oh, I don't want to do this thing, or I'm better than this thing. I'm going to get somebody else to do it and push it down.
They
the
think
line.
it's beneath them.
They think it's beneath them. Delegation is supposed to be about empowerment. It's supposed to be a way for you to give somebody work that they can really engage with and grow from, so that they can better serve you, the organization, and ultimately themselves. And we get that reverse all the time. Furthermore, delegation and outsourcing is the last step, because if you outsource something, so let's go reverse. And I know actually I never put it this way. If you outsource something that you could have automated, you're dehumanizing the person you're outsourcing to.
Yeah, that is beneath them. That's actually just
Absolutely.
like it's just like it's beneath you to do that work. It's beneath them to do that work. If somebody could literally just press a button and it's done for them.
Exactly. So
It's where the power is of AI today. People are like, "Oh, you're going to lose your job because of AI." Like, wait a second. If that is the case, then you're thinking about this the wrong way.
Right. And so if you outsource something you could automate it, then you have that issue. If you automate something that was not optimized, all you're doing is digging deeper into the hole faster, because you shouldn't have automated it in the first place, because you shouldn't be doing it at all. There are so many things that people go through the motions in their business because that's the way it's supposed to be done. And then they come in and they say, well, let's automate it because that seems like a cool thing to do. And then you sign up for some service, you hire a consultant to do something, and 3 months later, you're like, why are we doing this thing? Well, we just spent all this money automating, so let's keep doing it at least. So we have to optimize first, which is in some ways the least sexy, right? Because fireproofing is never as fun or sexy as firefighting.
Yeah.
But it's not sustainable. So we have to say, like, all right, this is what we do every day. We pay bills every day. We put social media posts out every day. We onboard clients every day. Why do we do it this way? Well, that was the thing that we did because of that. And we hired, okay, well, let's look at our onboarding. Why do we send postcards to clients? Well, we've been doing that for 20 years. It's like, okay, but nobody cares about postcards anymore. Or maybe they do, but they probably don't care about postcards. Why aren't we doing text messages? Well, because we just don't know how to do it. We didn't do it. People want text messages. Why aren't we updating? So like the idea of like, let's take a look at how we're doing what we're doing and why. Most companies don't do that. So they just say like, let's do AI and replace 3 people. We don't know how to do that. And then let's just outsource this to another country, even though I don't trust the provider to do it because I'm not communicating it correctly. It's just a mess. Yeah. And they stay in this like rinse cycle over and over doing the same stuff.
And I find it fascinating. I think you always look back at certain people that you care about and be like, what is the lesson they've taught you? And the greatest lesson my dad ever taught me And there's a bunch of them from a value standpoint. There's a bunch of them from integrity and work ethic. But the one thing that I could take away and say, hey, like, what is the in practice lesson that you've taught me most practical is when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging.
Yes.
And being a firefighter himself, I remember, my first real business, I DJ'd growing up. I cut lawns, did pressure cleaning, did anything I could. My brother trained dogs and a bunch of stuff, right? We were always in that, like, how do we,
Make a buck.
we had to, right?
Yeah.
That was what we were doing, So in the world of like sports performance and coaching athletes, I got to the point where I built a system based upon my reputation that produced results, and I got really, really good at producing results. And everyone said, hey, if you want to be the best, go over to CAV. Like, that's what's going to happen. Like, don't go there if you wanted to, just get training. You're going over there because you're not going to like it, but you're going to like the outcome. You're not going to like the process. You're not going to like the work. You're going to like the outcome. And that became very predictable. If you came into my world, you were going to win. It was very predictable. And people didn't like that all the time because of competition. We're like, well, there's a better way. You're doing this, you're doing that. Well, we're winning, and we're winning the right way. So get over it. But then I went from 1 facility to 2 facilities to 3 to 39 different facilities because I thought that was the dream. And then you realize that, well, the only time that your phone rings is when there's a problem. So you went from being this person that I wanted to build something. The interesting thing, my mom's a teacher, my dad's a firefighter. My brother became a firefighter. I said, listen, why don't you go into the fire service? I was in bunker gear and knew how to grab an SCBA since I was a kid. I've been on my first run that my dad did, a guy went through, a windshield and literally, died, and I was a kid. And I'm like, all right, cool. That's what you do. That's what we fix.
Mm-hmm.
It became part of who I was. And I had this ability similar to you say within chaos, like I was a light switch on and off, right? In a good way. So I always knew that was the backup plan. Like if I didn't go to college and play college football, if I didn't go to the NFL and make millions of dollars and then come back and be Iron Man and be a philanthropist, which is what I knew I was supposed to do. It didn't happen. Wish I was. But if that was not going to happen, the backup plan would be go be a firefighter. So I ended up building this business to the point where I had 39 different locations. And every time my phone rang, it was a problem. Nobody calls you to tell you that we had a great day. Mm-hmm. They call you to tell you that we can't fix something. And I ended up realizing really quickly, like, oh shit, my brother's a firefighter, my dad's a firefighter, and sure as hell, I'm a firefighter. I'm just fighting different fires. And I never really thought about, well, why am I not fireproofing my business? And then, working with you over the years, it was like, it's because you didn't have all these things set up. So I think we should talk about the difference between firefighting and fireproofing. What is the difference and why? I think entrepreneurs do one of 3 things with chaos. They either create chaos, they chase chaos, or they calm chaos. But most importantly, you're going to choose which type of chaos you're going to be in. And then they feel validated that they fix it because they created the problem. So sometimes it's this like loop. What's the difference between firefighting and fireproofing?
Yeah. So again, fireproofing never feels as sexy as firefighting, right? Because it's always, people want to be the person that people call when something's wrong. Whether they say it or not, right? Especially entrepreneurs, though. Not everybody wants to be fair, let me correct that. Entrepreneurs absolutely want to be the person that can fix everything and is needed. And I'll tell you, it's because our value, and I say our because I'm an entrepreneur too, our value in many ways is so tied to our companies, right? And our role in the company, that when a company truly grows, it will grow beyond your value if you let it. Most companies...
You think so?
Yes, because most entrepreneurs become their own bottleneck. We know this.
Yeah.
A perfect example of this is I had a client years ago who was an amazing copywriter. And he was creating information products and selling them, and he was doing 8 figures at the time. And he was also the CEO and running the company. And basically, when he came to me, his biggest struggle was that he'd been trying so hard for so long to hire an amazing copywriter so that he could focus on being the CEO and growing the company. And the very first conversation we had, I was like, why aren't you looking for a CEO so you can be the great copywriter that you are? And loving it. And it was like a light bulb went off. He'd never thought of it that way.
Permission to do the right thing, though.
Right. Well, but it's like you don't have to be the guy at the top. What do you mean? It's like this is your value to the company. You're a shitty CEO, right? Like, so why are you trying to be more of the thing that you're shitty at and get somebody who is not as good as you to do the thing that you're amazing at? And we see that all the time. So most entrepreneurs that start a company, they might be amazing at getting that company to $1 million in revenue. They may be lucky enough to get it to 3, but I have very rarely seen that entrepreneur get a company to 10, and almost never have seen that entrepreneur get the company to 100. Somebody else needs to be able to do that. And it's just a matter of, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when are you going to realize that you have to step out of the way if you want the company to grow. Now, not everybody does. I'm a big fan of the lifestyle business. I could totally bring somebody in to run my business and grow it beyond all of my wildest dreams. But I'd still want to be coaching.
Yeah.
So
I think you like solving problems, and I think you like interesting things.
right. Yes, exactly. And so to me, fireproofing is very interesting. Firefighting is exciting sometimes, but I've fought enough fires at this point that it's not that interesting. So fireproofing means let's look at how we're doing things and why we're doing it. Let's create really great processes. Let's document things. Let's set up systems in case this happens. And let's be really intentional about the way we communicate, why we communicate. And here's a crazy one. Let's define what urgent means to this business and what it doesn't. Because when you don't define things in the absence of those, everything becomes urgent. Everything becomes crazy. So yeah, that's fireproofing versus firefighting. I get worked up about it. I love it though.
Cool. So I think where I'd like to kind of go with the conversation, because I think there's so many frameworks that you use and you're really good at that, right? And I think it's really validating to see the work that you do as an entrepreneur make an impact on other people's lives. You've been behind the curtain of hundreds and hundreds of businesses. If I were to start a business from scratch and I was actually good at what I do, like let's just give an example of like I'm already really good at what I do, but I need to build a business. Believe it or not, like step one, I'm going to use all of the people that I know that we both know that you've introduced me to. You've introduced me to some incredible people. So let's talk about that. So the first, step one, I would say, okay, I want to start with Simon Bowen, and we're going to build out our models. We're going to make sure that we're going to take our intellectual property and we're going to put it in an environment that is able to be explained in such a way that when you draw it, people draw into you, and now all of a sudden it's easily to self-assess and put themselves in a bucket. So they could fill themselves into that so that you're no longer selling them. You could just serve them, and it's very easy. So you remove some of the emotion out. So that's like step one. That would be like the first person. And then I would probably move to, I need to create the proper infrastructure so that I would move right to you. I would say, okay, Ari, like we need to set up our communication systems. Like what's the right communication systems we need? We need to set up our project management. What's the right project management systems we need? We need to set up how we
Document processes.
create processes, document things. How do we do that, right? It's one fun one that I forget, right? Amazing. So, and then I would say, okay, cool. Well, we need a naming convention. We need hierarchies. We need organizational skills. And then we need to be like, well, before I even get started, my personal life is a mess. So then you're like, wait a second. Yes, you want to do this business, but you need to move to your personal life. So you get into like inbox zero and you start to like organize that and get that dialed in. So I'd move from one person to the next person. And then I'd ping like a Joe Polish and be like, hey, biggest lesson I got, which is the elf versus the half client. So get the elves, right? And it's like, all right, cool. So now I know who I need to talk to. You introduced me to Dean Jackson, and it's like, how do you get communication clear in writing? So the super signature, how do you actually help people?
Yep, love it.
Super clear, like very, very easy to do. Take Clay Hebert, for example. He's really good at taking this and creating a soundbite and dissecting all of this stuff and then creating a simple soundbite and then putting it together. So before you even start, you would start with this kind of like base group. Now, what's interesting is most people don't do that. They start their business, they get it going, then it just turns into a big bird's nest. And I go back to the fishing analogy, in firefighting EMS, we tie knots all the time, and there's a water knot is a great example of an interesting knot. A water knot is a knot that you could just do these loops to it, but you pull one thing and then it all comes out. And I could get the rope to be about, I could get 100-meter rope to be about this big in a water knot, and it's beautifully braided, but I could just pull one line of it and it opens up completely. Mm-hmm. And similar to like when you're fishing, if you like, I use a spinning rod. So if I cast, it's like, and I do it right over and over again, then all of a sudden that line's going to have the right level of tension. But if I let my thumb off of it, I'm going to create a bird's nest, and then I'm going to have to fix it. It's the same thing with knots. People that don't know what they're doing and they need to secure something in their business, they tie a lot of knot to it. So they just go one knot and they do a loop and then they pull it and they realize
Double,
like
triple,
what's going on. They're like, hey,
yeah.
that's not secure enough. I feel a little bit of like, it's the slack's there. I got to tie it again. And then you go, what type of knot is that? And it's a lot of knot. I was like, what type of knot? It's a lot of knot. Yeah. And it's because when you don't know what you're doing, you tie a lot of knots to it and you create these loops over and over again to create security. But that security isn't the right tension. It's bulky. And in business, it's bloated. So bloated businesses affect the number one problem with business, which is cash flow. Mm-hmm. When a business is bloated, it's going to become a cash flow problem.
Yeah.
And the thing is, people always think it's bloat because of people. But oftentimes it's bloat because of a bad process, too many processes, the wrong process, and the wrong product.
Well,
so,
then you have people making up for it, basically.
And exactly. And then it's like, now I have to be important to fix this problem that shouldn't even existed. So, instead of tying a lot of knot to their business, tie the right knot. And I find that you have the ability to say, wait a second, if you're coming to me with a lot of knot, you have so many opportunities, let's clean it up and then let's build this right. And I think that oftentimes people forget that. They don't want to take the time to actually unravel the knot.
Yeah.
They just cut it, but then they realize like, well, they've just created a problem later, like longer down the road.
Yeah, so I always, that's a good analogy. And what I often think about and what I tell people a lot of times is I think about the Ironman swim. All right, so I did an Ironman, as you know. And in the Ironman swim, you're doing 2.4 miles and you have to swim with your head down. And every so often, though, you need to pick your head up. Just bring your eyes above the water so that you can make sure you're still going in the right direction. Mm-hmm. A lot of people sort of miss out on that, right? It's so easy to just keep your head down and just swim faster, right? Just keep going, going, right? Without having to stop and be like, wait a minute, let me look. And if you're off course, then be like, okay, it's going to cost me a few seconds, but I got to move over here and get back on course. Mm-hmm. And that becomes a rhythm that is so important, but is so lost on so many people. Because again, what happens too is that you get into this place where you're so busy doing so many things that you don't even really know why you're still doing it. And what I love when someone says that, how you been? Oh, I've been so busy. I mean, this is me being like stirring the pot, but whenever somebody says that, I'm always like, what are you so busy with? And 9 times out of 10, they're like,
I'm just busy.
I'm just so busy. It's like, well, you don't have a freaking clue because you're so in the weeds that you don't even know what state you're in anymore.
Hard to read the label from inside the jar.
Can't read the label from inside the jar.
See, smart person said that. I tell people it's like growing up, a smart man learns from others' mistake. A smart man learns from his mistake, but a wise man learns from others. And I think you need to have others in your life.
I think wise men learn from their wives.
Very, 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 I'm lucky enough to have a very smart wife. Thank goodness.
Me too.
Yeah. So how do you think showing up in your business as a leader transforms how you show up at home?
There's no difference, right? The way you do anything is the way you do everything, right?
I completely disagree with that statement.
Okay, good. Well, let's talk about that because you're the same person. Mm-hmm. You're like the same biological meat, right? When you're at work versus when you're at home.
Yeah.
So there's those people that want to get totally dialed in at work and they're at the top, 99% of their performance. And then they come home to stress and chaos and their response to that is to go back to work at 11 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night. Yeah, I come home for an hour and a half, spend some time with the family, and then I get back to work, because that's where you feel safe and that's what you know. But if you can't do it everywhere, something isn't working, because there is no such thing as a work-life balance. It is a work-life integration. And the way that you do everything in those situations is the way you do anything is the way you do everything. Because so I was at a soccer game earlier today, on the sidelines, watching the whole thing. And in that time, when there were breaks in the game, I listened to carbon messages and I responded to people. And I got things to be moving forward. And somebody responded back to me and I got back to them. And a conversation moved forward that would have been lingering in my mind for another day otherwise, if it hadn't been, and then my attention would have been gone. So the way that I operate in terms of efficiency, and the way that I operate in terms of efficiency is something that is across the board for me. As I said earlier, those efficiencies bring out the human element more, which I think people don't always understand. That if you're automating this and you're optimizing this, and you're removing the human element. No, it allows me to be messy and to be emotional and to experience the world around me or the family around me, because all these other things are handled in my life and in my business.
So when you say how you do one thing is how you do everything, and I say I disagree with that, it's because in an area of my life, I'm probably one of the most OCD and organized persons you will ever meet when it comes to coaching. I am never late for a meeting. I am always on point when it comes to an environment. When we're at the Olympic stage, like everything is prepared, dialed in, and super
I
structured.
already know what you're going to say and what I'm going to respond, but keep going.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, and you open up my car and it's an absolute mess, right?
And do you feel good about that?
I don't have an emotional attachment to it.
None?
Doesn't
You don't care at all that your car's like that?
surprisingly no. I'm not embarrassed when someone comes into my car. It doesn't really affect me. Would I like it organized? I like things organized, but I'm not great at the organization. So the how to, I'm not so great at it. But when it comes to I still put my clothes out for the next day in my life, because I truly believe every day is game day. And whether it be NFL game day, whether it be a college game day, whether it be practice, whether it be, getting ready to the Olympics, it's like, I will put out our jerseys. I will make sure that we're all ready to go. We do an inventory check. We're going to do a debrief when we're done. And we structure that. Like, I don't operate my life like that outside of sports. Outside of business, I don't operate like that. But inside of a practice session, if you're in a meeting with me, there is no time clocked. It's a mess. But when you give me a script and we're running a practice session, we're on the field, I am dialed in. A great example is, we don't teach the drill during practice. We teach the drill outside of practice in preparation for practice. And then when we get into practice, everybody knows what they're doing. And then we're just doing systems checks and we're ready to rock and roll. But in business, when we get into meetings, I tend to be like, all right, guys, this is what we're doing. This is what we're working through. And it becomes a waste of time. I have not been able to flip that business to sports to business analogy in my world, the way that it becomes how I do one thing is how I do everything.
So I think, first of all, you're looking too micro in this, too micro, because I would argue that your car being the way it is part of what makes you able to show up in those other places. We all need to have outlets in some sort. I'm not saying that that's like your outlet necessarily, but we need to have those places in elements of our life. We need to be able to compartmentalize. Mm-hmm. And one of those compartments is going to be the really messy, shitty one, because without that, you can't have the other one. Nobody, even the most OCD people, it's almost impossible to have everything perfect all the time, because they interact with the world around them, but they control what they can. And that might be a lot for some people. You told me that we couldn't do this tomorrow because you have to take your son to school.
Yeah.
And that's non-negotiable.
It's a non-negotiable.
Right. So what's the difference? That's the same thing you would do showing up for somebody else in business too. That same part of your brain that's allowing you to do that and allowing you to say that and saying like, this is just something I do. I would argue that if your car was completely clean and organized, you would struggle with some of those other things, because there would be some area where you need to have that controlled chaos.
Interesting. I always like to look at like introspectively, how do I figure out a way to create reflection into why I am the way I am? Because I believe that in order for an athlete to be successful, they have to know who they are. So like number one is you have to know who you are, you have to know your role, and then you have to understand your value and how you interact with that environment so that you could stay in a roster for a certain amount of time. Unless you're the best in, like if you're Michael Jordan, you get to show up and you get to be whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
Like you could do that. You could act a certain way because we all have to navigate around you because you are the stud on the roster. But if, for instance, I went from being an All-American to being, I'm happy to get a roster spot, because when you start going into different levels, sometimes when you go to one level, you go to the next level, you're not on the top of the food chain anymore. So I think an athlete needs to have self-awareness, and then they have to know their role. So know who they are, and then they need to know their role, and then they need to know their value, so so they could understand how to make a roster and make that impact. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I always try to figure out environments to get good feedback from people I trust, like you, and I think that's a good reflection point to gain more awareness. Most people don't have lighthouses like I do in my life. I have a lot of lighthouses, you being one of them, and many others, for everything. I don't listen to you for a lot of stuff in my life because I have someone else that I look up to in that area. You don't need to be one thing to everything.
Right. And not pizza.
This is true. Pizza and ice cream are the way to go. There's a lot of value in being second and satisfied. It's this idea of like either you have to be the king or you could be the king maker. It's something that Simon had taught me a lot, which is, hey, you're really good at putting other people on, and you have to learn. It's like, hey, which one's more powerful to you? Like you always be in that space, or you could actually do that with a lot of people.
There's one company that provides 92% of the pizza mozzarella for the entire country.
No way.
One company.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they provide all of it for Papa John's, Pizza Hut, Domino's, and have for about 20 years because they came up with some new process. But guy's a multi-billionaire selling mozzarella, but nobody knows.
Nobody knows who he is.
Nobody knows who he is.
I don't think he cares.
Nope.
Sweet. I think that it's interesting. Your journey started in this productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness space because you were diagnosed with Crohn's disease. You were working busy hours doing, greenhouses and construction and doing all of these things. And then you went from this idea of saying like, well, what could you get done on a lunch break versus what could you get done like for your day if that was all you had? Some people work hard for their lunch break. Some people work hard for their weekend. And you have philosophies over like, what is a weekend?
Yeah.
You have philosophies that are like, well, wait a second. Instead of working for that lunch break, what happens if that was the only time that you had to work? I understand where it came from is like this idea of going through Crohn's and then figuring and doing this kind of like diagnostics of yourself because you weren't getting the answers. What about only working 1 hour a day? And like, nobody thinks like that. Walk us through that process. And then I want to talk about where you are today because you've been in the shadows a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a situation that I found myself in, right? I was so sick and so weak that I'd come off of this 3-year stint of working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week in construction, not taking good care of my body, and just it broke. And when I realized that, like, if I could get an hour a day of work because I wasn't sick or I wasn't tired or something, like that was a miracle, basically. And so it was like, all right, well, all the productivity systems out here are like, how do we get the most done in your day? And, how do you do this and that? Nothing was like addressing the idea of you have extremely limited time. How can you still get it all done? Because the thing is at that point, right, the question is not what would you do in that hour? It's what wouldn't you do because you couldn't. But if those things still have to get done, then who or what is going to is going to do them for you? And that's in some ways where sort of OAO came from, right? So we need to have systems in place. We need to have automations in place, and we need to be able to outsource very effectively in that hour. Furthermore, I think it was Gary Vee that talks about like you have your 9 to 5 and then you have your 9 to 2.
Yeah.
Well, now it's like you have your 9 to 5 and you also have your 12 to 1. And you can do something really, really effectively in that time and build something great. Because this idea that restrictions breed innovation is something that I think about every single day. And I always like to give the example of MacGyver, But nobody ever said to MacGyver, like, there's a Home Depot right there. Go get whatever you need, fill up the cart, and go back across the street and blow up that building.
Grab the duct tape, baby. Let's go.
It was like, here's duct tape and a box of Bisquick. Go blow up the building.
Yeah.
right? So that idea to me was always like, I can do more with less. And I've seen time and time again companies who have tons of people, tons of money, tons of resources fail because they're not utilizing them correctly.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really cool is big mistake that I've made, but also when I look at business, you've looked at life this way, which is, you could either start to trim down what you don't need, cut, but that's not how you grow. Or you could say, stop, what is the only thing that you need, and build up.
Yeah.
And you're doing that. You're basically doing the right principle for business with your personal life. And then that's allowing you to impact your business better. For the last, I've been around you for almost a decade now, and probably even more, which is crazy to think about. And to watch your growth actually go down in the sense of popularity and notoriety, while the people that you've supported businesses have gone up. I take a little bit of pride in like, hey, wait a second, give credit to where it's due. I remember like messaging Ali Abdaal your content when he was in the YouTube space, just getting started, and obviously, has built an incredibly respectable business globally online. And I find that it's fascinating that there's so many people that have taken concepts that you've taught because they're first principles. And this is not saying that Ali took anything from you, but your stuff are universally true, and I call them like there's universal languages. There's you break bread with somebody, doesn't matter, like you do that, it's a universal language. Art, interpretation is a universal language. Music, it's a universal language. You go there, we're talking Dali, whatever it may be, it's the interpretation. In sport, these things break through personal and political values. They're all about like, how do you communicate? Your stuff has transcended time. It's been protected by first principles, even if the technology isn't where it needed to be. You've been behind the curtain, behind some of the biggest businesses and biggest business coaches, right? Whether it be Dan Sullivan, whether it be Tony Robbins of the world, myself, and a lot of other people. Todd Herman's been in your world. There's a lot of really good people that we've been around, which is really cool. But finally, I think that we're in a stage where technology is caught up. Like I finally feel technology is actually caught up to your not being this kind of mechanical Turk style structure to where you could actually systematize things, streamline it, and provide it to more people than ever before because of where we are, not just with AI, but with some of these platforms.
Yeah, for sure.
You're now kind of coming out of the woodwork a little bit, from woodworking to, creating these things. Why now, and what's the next layer? Because I think your concepts are still true. They're still first principles.
So I realized that when I got into private coaching originally, which was, I don't know, 15 years ago now. And then when I started to build the business really beyond me, we made a very intentional effort to separate the productivity system from me, right? So we wanted it to stop being Ari's productivity system and really became Less Doing and the replaceable founder. And my team did an amazing job of that. And I followed all my principles and I became so replaceable that I wasn't doing any coaching. I was growing a great business. I was still speaking, which I loved, but I was growing this business and I really wasn't doing a lot of coaching. And when the pandemic hit, the business was still continuing, but now the speaking wasn't happening. And I felt like this, and I was doing EMS stuff in a small town in upstate New York and really enjoying the human interactions that I was having. And I missed coaching. And that's where I decided to get back into the private coaching, which I was doing asynchronously. And now I've been doing that for, 5 years or so. And I never went away. I've been working with all these really big businesses and some really incredible entrepreneurs doing bigger things in some ways than I ever did before, but very, very much behind the scenes. Yeah. And compounding that is that we had a fifth child who's now 2.5, and she's about to go to another school and stuff. And so I feel like our life is, and we moved, we built a new house. Like, I feel like our life is stabilized in a way where I'm remembering what I missed, and I want to create that opportunity again to be able to coach so many more people and impact so many more businesses. And that's where I'm at now.
And I think it's interesting because you actually make more money and there's more profit in the other stuff that's not seen, which is which is very true. So we kind of create
with
this
less
thing.
work.
Yeah, but you create this thing because it's important for you.
Yeah.
And I think that you talked about, people that come for the content, right? And then you build it out, and you're kind of at the point now where you're transitioning back to what you think matters. So talk about that a little bit, where people come for like maybe this problem solving stuff, and then they end up staying for the glue of what matters.
Well, and that's the thing is that I never stopped creating content. And especially, as you said, the technology's caught up. There's so many interesting things to talk about now with AI and replacing individuals, but then still being able to use outsourcing delegation to individuals for the right things. There's so many opportunities to do things in business that I had imagined that we'd be able to do years ago, but it required a lot more duct tape and a lot more sort of coding and know-how, which we don't need now. Yeah, people come for the content. The saying is that people come for the content, they stay for the coaching, and they renew for the community.
That makes
right?
sense.
So the coaching never went away. The content is continuing to grow, and now I want to rebuild that community.
I think it's really important. I think it's really, really cool, and I'm happy to be a part of it because I think it makes such a big difference in people's lives. Like you get the ability to, people could get access to that $10,000 RE a day. Every day, and without having to fork that bill because of what you're building, which I think is amazing. I remember going back to my first in-person session. I don't know if you remember it. I drove up for a 3-hour session with you in New York.
At Soho House in Dumbo.
And I had this like massive list. Remember, like
Yeah.
like I'm old school, so like I go like everything is analog for me. So I write it all down. I had this huge list of all this shit I had to get done, and I'm like stressed out. And technology doesn't work for me. And I'm spending this 3-hour session with the great Ari Meisel, you know, this lion of a man, right? I'm just like, what the hell? So 2 hours and 45 minutes into this session, I'm like, all right, Ari, like we haven't got anything done. Like what the F, right? Like, thank you for talking to me, but I don't need another friend. I need the 3-hour genius that I thought I was getting. Like, well, show me the list. And then you went through it and you're like, all right, well, give me your computer. Within 10 minutes, every single thing on my list was done. And we had 5 minutes to spare. And I think I was so mad.
Just took some foreplay, that's all.
I was so mad that it was so easy for you that I wanted to kill you. But then I was also like, well, now I don't have any more problems. I got to go find more problems. So I thought it was fantastic.
I don't know which screw to turn.
And I think it's really cool. So yeah, we're in a place now where you're building that up, and it's really exciting. Some of the people we mentioned today are some of the people that you've shown to the world and have brought into your ecosystem too. I'm a big believer of like when you build a brand, you got to build a super brand. So like every Superman stands for something, so who does Ari stand for?
The overwhelmed.
And every superhero stands against something. Tony Stark, I tell the story all the time, but like Tony Stark stands against weapons in the wrong hands because he is, he sees, his name, on a bomb. What does Ari stand against?
There's so many productivity tips and tricks and, hacks and things that people have been taught over the years that have made their life so much worse and created so much more stress. And I hate that. I hate seeing that. And it's like, because it's so, like, nobody has ever learned how to do a to-do list properly. We just don't learn it. Nobody, and I can say this because I have children in middle school, nobody learns how to use email properly because they're being taught by people who never learned how to use it properly. Mm-hmm. Right? And then you get a book like Getting Things Done, and David Allen is an incredible force that has helped lots and lots of people. But the interesting thing with something like Getting Things Done is that it's so good for the people it's so good for. And for the other people, it is so much more stress.
Eat the frog.
Don't even.
Eat the frog.
Eat the frog is the single worst piece of productivity advice that has ever been laid on this planet. Brian Tracy clearly is a sadistic person and wanted to hurt people.
That's not true.
The idea that you should do your hardest thing first is so self-centered and so unbelievably bad in terms of looking at how you do things better. Because what if the most important thing for you is to write a blog post, but you can't write before 5 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night even. So you just ruin your whole day. And then not only that, your team is waiting for you to make decisions on things, but no, I got to eat the frog first. Fuck you.
I had to get you started, baby. Jesus. Let's get you rocking and rolling. Oh man. So you stand for something, you stand against something. What's your flaw? Every like Batman's got a flaw. You know what I mean? Spider-Man's got his flaw, right? He lacks this.
What's Batman's flaw? What's Batman's flaw?
Come on now. That's the. Hey, type in the chat what's Batman's flaw, but I'll post it for you. How about that? I'll give you the answer so I don't create an open loop, which is horrible for people. But what is your flaw?
I care too much. No, of course that's not it.
That is definitely not it.
No, I surprisingly, maybe surprisingly, since I do a lot of coaching, I think that I actually am quite lacking in EQ. And I think that is a result of my upbringing. I was only child and sort of was left to my own devices a lot of times, and I had to become a chameleon in a lot of ways. And the problem with that is it worked very well in those different scenarios, but it makes it very difficult to have a really strong core sense of self. So sometimes it is very hard for me to see outside of myself and read the situations correctly, which is another reason, by the way, why asynchronous coaching works so well for me, because I can step back and look at it and think about it. But that's definitely something which, again, is surprising as a coach.